Hey guys, and thanks for joining myself and part of our team, Lewis, to talk about obviously the squad situation with Wolves over the summer. This is part one of a three-part series where we're going to be looking at keeping, loaning, or selling. We're going to start with the goalkeepers and defenders. Me and Lewis are going to be discussing who we should keep, loan, and sell. And if we are going to get rid of them, Lewis has been scouring the transfer market and has got replacements and players that he thinks would fit Gary O'Neill's squad. How are you doing, Lewis?
Hi, Dave. I'm all good, thank you. You?
Very good. I'm really looking forward to this, actually, mate. We put a lot of work in behind the scenes to getting this ready to go. As I say, this is part one of three, guys. So make sure you do hit that subscribe and bell notification because you can obviously follow the series. And of course, you do get your Wolves news and content. And we might be putting a few clips out on our socials as well. So, Lewis, shall we start with the keepers, mate?
Yeah, happy to do that, Dave.
Okay, so the first keeper that's in line there, young man, Portuguese, number 2 or number 3 over there at the moment in the Euros, Jose Sarr. What's you thinking about Jose Sarr, mate?
I think Joe's had a really good season, and some fans have criticised him for his ball playing abilities and ability to play out from the back. But for me, he was really important to the success we had, and he often made really memorable saves in games. More than once in last season. And I think he really was a crucial part in the success, in the successful run that we had last winter into spring. So I would be happy to keep him, really. But there is interest from Saudi Arabia. And in terms of the club's position with his contract doesn't expire until 2027. So the club is in a good position with that. So they could command a significant fee for Sarr, especially coming from Saudi Arabia who can afford to pay. So if there was an offer around 25 or 30 million pound for Sarr, that would definitely be enough to tempt me to sell him, because I think we could find a replacement very easily. And we could also use the money for other areas of the team that need to be strengthened. So unless a massive offer comes in, I would be happy to keep him. But at the same time, if that offer does come in, I would be happy to sell. So for me, I'd put Sarr in that sell box.
You would, but so basically with Jose Sarr, he's kind of for you. He's bouncing up and down between keep and sell. So basically, what offer would tempt you to sell him?
Yeah, I think that anything above 25 million, and that's a good profit on the fee we paid for him. And obviously he's a keeper who's I think he's 30 now, is he, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would be happy to sell him for that price, and it would mean that we can reinvest some of that money, not just on a replacement goalkeeper, but also in the rest of the squad. So for me, he's going to go in the sell box.
So Lewis, for these videos, by the way, is acting the role of Matt Hobbs. He is the Wolves sporting director. I'm acting the role of chairman, or maybe manager. I don't know. So basically, if 25 million comes in, you're going to sell Jose Sarr.
Yeah,
absolutely, because Wolves do need to raise some money to bring in other things, but then you've got to get a replacement, and we are going to look at the rest. We are going to look at some potential replacements that Lewis, who is for all intents and purposes the sporting director of Wolves for these videos, shortly, but we will go on to the rest of the goalkeeping department first of all, and we're going to look at now at Dan Bentley, mate. Now Dan Bentley, obviously, is currently number 2. He's got a contract that ties him to Wolves until 2025, so that's not that long. But Wolves do have a further option to extend by a year. He has provided solid backup, but lacks a lot of Premier League experience, which does raise a concern if Sarr were to leave. But Bentley's presence is ensure that there's no immediate rush to secure another backup, but his lack of top flight minutes might be a worry. His key points for me is that he's reliable backup option, his contract security, but he has got questionable Premier League experience. And if you're going to sell Sarr and Dan Bentley, is he ready to be a number one? I'm not so sure about that. As sporting director, what you're going to do, Lewis? I'm like, I'm going. We need to, I'm a bit worried. I'm the manager.
Yeah.
You've already sold Sarr, and what's your thoughts on Dan Bentley?
Yeah, if we do sell, if that offer came in for Sarr and he did leave, Dave, we definitely need to replace him as a number one. Dan Bentley wouldn't be able to fill that role.
No.
And in an ideal world, we would have a stronger number two because, like you said, things can happen to your number one choice goalkeeper. He could get injuries. It could be suspended. It could go to an international tournament, as we saw last season. Some of our players went to the AFCON and the Asia Cup. So these kind of things can come up. Sorry. So in an ideal world, you would have a stronger number two, but there's more pressing needs this season, I think, in other positions. And with that, if I was Matt Hobbs, I would definitely trigger that option to keep him at the club for another year, to avoid losing him on a free at the end of this season coming up. So I would keep him. In an ideal world, I would replace him, but he's going to be kept this summer.
That's an interesting one because from your point of view, in an ideal world, you want to get rid of Dan Bentley, but you keep him. And in an ideal world, you want to keep Jose Sarr, but if a 25, 30 million offer comes in, you sell him.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, it's an interesting, complicated. You can already see how complicated these jigsaws are. Okay, mate. So that's obviously Dan Bentley. Let's look at Tom King now. Now, Tom King, obviously, is number 3. He's had a couple of games for Wolves. He's valued for his dedication, contributions in training. He might not see much game time, but he remains a key figure, apparently, in the dressing room. Basically, his contributions to the team, strong training performances, positive dressing room influence, a backup if needed. Obviously, given the current goalkeeping setup, Wolves in the transfer market hinge on Jose Sarr's future. If he stays, the club might obviously need new signings. Considerations for you now, I'm saying to you, it's like if Sarr stays, it maintains the current squad balance and focus resources in other areas. But if Sarr leaves, there's an immediate search for a first choice goalkeeper, and we've got to integrate that player into the team dynamics straight away. So where does Tom King fit in all of that?
Well, as you mentioned, Dave, there's been reports that he's a valued trainer. He's hardworking. He's a good member of the dressing room. But I also found out that he's earning about £10,000 a week. So that's quite a lot of money for a third choice goalkeeper. Obviously, it's a Premier League goalkeeper, nevertheless. But I think that £10,000 a week could be reinvested, especially when we're looking to cut the wage bill this season. So if there was interest in him, somebody coming to buy him, he'd be one I would look to move on, as I simply don't think he has a role in the club in the medium to long term. He has it at least this season, but if an offer was there, I would definitely take that.
Okay, and then is it Louis Molden we've got there that we've got in there as well? Now, tell us a little bit about Louis Molden.
Yeah, so Louis Molden played last season in 2 loans. He played Rochdale in the first half of the season, and then Northampton Town. And over the 2 loan spells, he made 41 appearances and kept 8 clean sheets in 2 mid-table sides. So he did quite well. He's obviously a very young goalkeeper. So if King isn't moved on, probably a loan makes sense for him again to get that first team experience. But if he is, I think I'd keep him in the under-23s to keep him playing very regularly, as often as possible. And then he could begin to push himself against Bentley. And if Sarr's kept, possibly Sarr in the long-term future. But definitely, I'd keep Molden in the squad.
So you're going to keep Molden in the squad there. I was bouncing King up, so you're going to keep Molden, and hopefully he can develop. So you got 2 keeps, mate. Okay, we've got 2 keeps. The other 2 have gone. Jose Sarr is obviously, Mr. Reliable. Apart from his kicking, his shot stopping's been amazing. He's been great for Wolves. He's, even if he's only still 30, that's still a good age for a goalkeeper. Personally, I'd ideally in a situation you want to bring in another number 1 for Jose Sarr and the new one to fight it out against. But with probably the financial crisis, the financial situation, that's not going to happen. So look, what are your thoughts on? You've done some research. What are your thoughts on who we're going to bring in?
Well, there was two names that I kind of picked out the field that was available. The first name is very well known. Is Aaron Ramsdale. Now,
so you're going to go for you're saying Aaron Ramsdale, yeah? He's from Arsenal, yeah.
Absolutely, and there was apparently some interest in him from Wolves earlier in the kind of just after the end of the season, but it looks like Arsenal are holding out for a £50 million transfer fee for Ramsdale, which is a lot of money for a goalkeeper. It's out of our price range. Obviously, Arsenal are dealing with their own FFP issues because of how much they have been spending in the past few years, so that they're looking to recoup some money. If Aaron Ramsdale was available for a cheaper price, maybe of 30 million, I'd definitely look to sign him because I think he's worth £30 million. But 50 million is, we can't afford to pay that. So that's where the kind of backup option that I'd kind of shortlisted came in. And that was a player at Las Palmas in Spain, and he's called Alvaro Valles. Now, he had a really good season last year. That's him. His contract expires at the end of next season. So he's either going to sign a new one or he's probably going to be sold this summer to avoid losing him on a free. So he could be available for around £15 million. He's 6'4".
Alvaro Valles, what league do they play in?
In Spain, the first division Spain.
Right, okay. And what's his nationality?
I think he's Spanish, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a very powerful goalkeeper. He comes for crosses a lot, and he's a good shot stopper too. So I think he's definitely one that maybe is a more realistic target in comparison to Ramsdale. He's obviously my second choice between the two. But, if we did sell Sarr, we'd have to sign a replacement. And if it had to be him, I'd feel quite comfortable still.
And what's his ball distribution like? Because obviously that's something that, the way Gary plays and the way Wolves are playing, they want a keeper that can play a bit of football as well and be confident with his distribution. Is that a strength?
Yeah, so he's a really good sweeper keeper. He can come out and play with his feet. And I think what's interesting about him was he's already been identified by the Wolves scouting squad as a potential replacement, even at this stage, without any major interest in Sarr. So I think that's a good sign that he fits the bill of what Gary wants.
Absolutely. So that's Alvaro Valles. So those are two options in the defence, depending on, and a lot of it really, really hinges on what happens with, of course, Jose Sarr. So, as I say, although you've got Jose Sarr there in this cell, we will reiterate that it's only if the right transfer fee comes in for him. So the defence, mate, first up, as you can see on there, is, of course, Max Kilman. Now, obviously, Wolves' defence's needs would largely depend on potential departments. If key players like Kilman or Semedo leave, reinforcements are going to be necessary, and we will be looking at that. The club is prepared, we assume, with a target list of centre-back, wing-back positions, but mainly to replace any leavers. Must keep an eye on the transfer market and be ready to act. So we're going to be covering off all of this. And then, of course, Lewis, our Wolves sporting director for today, has got a potential targets. Max Kilman been linked with a move, I think, to United. Yesterday, he's been linked with Julian Lopetegui at West Ham. What's your take on that, mate?
Well, I've seen, it's been reported by The Athletic especially that the club are confident they will keep hold of him. Kilman, who's become an integral part of Gary's system, he played every minute last season. However, like you said, there is interest in him, as was the case last year with that interest from Napoli. This time, obviously, again, as you said, Julian Lopetegui is interested in him to take him to West Ham. And I think the money that's being labelled around him, around £40 million. Now, I really like that fee. I think it's a great fee for Kilman because we're very happy that we're getting our value for money out of a player that we'd signed.
And
obviously, Maidenhead.
Such a long time that sort of money is really going to make a big impact the way that profit and sustainability works as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a real key point, actually, that we'll come back to in probably part 3 when we're talking about the attackers. But also at the same time, I think the main incentive I have to sell Kilman for that fee, if that is there, is that I'm not convinced by him as a leader. And obviously he became Wolves captain last season. But I think the sale of him is the cleanest way to take that responsibility off him. If you were, Gary, and you went in on the first day of pre-season this year and said, look, Max, thanks for everything you did last season. You're going to stay here, but you're not going to be our captain. That kind of message that sends out to Max and the rest of the dressing room is you weren't good enough at your job last year, and we're finding somebody else in the squad who can do it. If you just sell him, that kind of takes all that pressure away. It's a very clean way to take that responsibility off Max. So I think for the right money, just the same with Sarr, that £40 million offer comes in from West Ham. I'm taking that offer.
So £40 million sell. Anything less than that, £40 million sell. Anything less than that, we're keeping.
Yeah.
But I do like your point, and it's something that I've thought about with Max. He's a lovely lad. He's got a great family as well. A lot, interestingly as well, with his family, because I've met his mum a couple of times at the games when he's been there. He's got a young brother who's in the Chelsea academy. They're based in London, so it would mean he'd move closer to his family. So that's another thing that we'd have to bear in mind with Max, because a lot of the time when we do have the London games, he doesn't go back. He goes off. His mom's there and his little brother and stuff, and they're off down in London. And I know it's not too far to go in London, but like if you're playing for a London club, you're a lot closer to his family. So that might be a consideration. So 40 million. Max is gone. Interesting. Okay, well, that brings us up next up to Craig Dawson. Now, Craig Dawson's obviously experience has been invaluable to the squad since he's come. Although his contract is due to expire next year, Wolves obviously would consider an extension. Not an immediate concern, as there's more urgent matters. But you'd think if he stays, fans can expect him to continue his leadership role as well for another season. Where are you with, where are you with Craig Dawson, mate? Obviously, he's had a groin injury. They took him out early to get that sorted, ready for next season. And I think we missed him at the end of last season massively.
Yeah, exactly, Dave. A sign of a good player to me is when he doesn't play, you notice his absence. And I think, like you said, towards the back end of last season, we really missed Craig Dawson, his leadership, his ability as a defender. And I think he is Wolves' number one centre-back. When he's fit, he's the best centre-back we have at the club. To me, that's not great because, unfortunately, he's not going to improve anymore. As a 34-year-old, he might level off and stay at the same ability for a while, but eventually he's going to begin to steadily decline. So I'm not going to move Dawson on, and I probably would give him a new contract after the summer. But I also wouldn't sell him because no offer is going to justify the value. It's going to be a very low offer. And for what he can give us next season, we won't get that kind of value out of any of the other centre-backs we have at the club or that we could bring in. But one thing I would say about Dawson, keep him definitely, offer him a contract. The club is going to have to prepare to replace the number one centre-back because I don't think the players we have at the club at the moment have the potential to reach the level of Dawson. So, we'll definitely keep him, but it's going to be a tough job to replace Dawson maybe next season.
And make sure you do stay tuned in this video because we do have some potential candidates that Lewis has researched and pulled out to talk about. Is Totti Gomez next on the list?
Yeah, I think Totti became a really pivotal part of the team for Gary after he settled on a 5 at the back system. And I'd definitely keep hold of him, especially after he signed a new long-term deal at the club.
So, yeah, Totti's, he went out on that loan to Grasshoppers. He's come in and, he can move with the ball as well. He can move the ball upfield. He's quite strong in the air. A few times he's been caught out, maybe a little bit naive at times, but he's, considering he's gone from where he is. And don't forget that Totti Gomez, although he's not made the Portugal squad, for the Euros. He has been in and around the squad in the build-up, so he's touching to get into that Portuguese squad, which is so strong. The fact that he's there or thereabouts shows that for them, he's probably one that will be part of the Portuguese squad come the next World Cup, the way his development is going. So that's another good one to pick up on. So next up, we've got Santiago Bueno. So obviously, he made a reasonably decent start to his career, and there's lots of high hopes for him for the future. He probably is expected to get more playing time, a bit more regular defensive setup, but his early impact suggests he could develop into a crucial part of the team's defensive strategy. I think he's Uruguayan, and Uruguayan defenders, have always generally, been pretty. I mean, Uruguay defenders have always been pretty hardcore. What's your thoughts on Santiago Bueno?
Yeah, I really like Santi. I think out of the three other centre-backs other than Dawson that were at the club last season, obviously Totti and Kilman and himself, he was the next best defender when he did play and he got minutes, especially towards the second half of the season. I don't see him being a direct replacement for Dawson in terms of playing in the middle of a back three, if that's how Gary would like to push on in the next few seasons. I think he's more suited to the right-hand side of that back three, more as a replacement for Kilman, really. But I definitely think he has a high ceiling, and he's definitely one that I'd keep at the club.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be staying, isn't he? I mean, they brought him in to develop, and hopefully next season could be a real breakthrough season. We saw flashes of real, how good he could be, but we also saw some flashes where he did, get a little bit lost on occasions. Yeah. And I think we saw that with Max Kilman as well. Without Dawson there, Max seems to play a lot better alongside when you got Cody in the middle, and then Dawson. Without them, he does seem to struggle a little bit. But I think Santiago Bueno looks more like he's still a very young age. I think he's only 23, 24. He's only going to get better. Yeah. So we've got someone there in a nice Villarreal top that's up next. And that, of course, is going to be Yerson Mosquera. Now, obviously, he will be back from his loan spell in Spain with Villarreal. And despite initial doubts about his return, because obviously he said how much he loved Villarreal and stuff like that. But yeah, if the Spanish press and the Villarreal press are going to ask him about, do you want to come back next year? He ain't going to say no, is he? I mean, he ain't going to say that. Of course, he's not. He's going to say the right thing. He's set to be integrated into Wolves' first team squad. This season has been pivotal for him as he aims to establish himself and prove his worth in the Premier League. You've probably watched a little bit of Yerson. Obviously, he's been out on loan at Villarreal. He's very highly regarded there. They want to keep him, ideally. What are you doing if you're Gary O'Neill and Matt Hobbs?
I think it's time to reap the rewards of scouting the player who was 19. Now he's 23. Yerson's obviously had a successful season in America at Cincinnati. I think they got to the latter stages of the MLS Cup over there and into the playoffs. He's had a really successful spell at Villarreal. He's now ready for the Premier League, in my opinion. And unless a sensational offer comes in from Villarreal, which I don't think it will, because the FFP regulations are really tight in Spain, he's definitely one that I'm going to keep. And I think he'll feel like a new signing to Gary.
Oh, absolutely. I am actually really excited to see what Yerson Mosquera can bring to the club. And I think he's a natural. It's a bit like Totti Gomez. We used him. He went out. Okay, it was a bit of an emergency thing. He came in, but he's really come in. His enthusiasm and his work rate and the way he's wanted to learn. If Yerson Mosquera, who's been playing, let's face it, for Villarreal, they're going to be up against some top forwards, and they've had a decent season. And the fact that they do want to keep him suggests to me that he could be part of the answer in the defence for next season. So look, before we get on to your kind of wing back situation, central defensive wise, okay, say we sell Kilman, Dawson stays, Totti Gomez stays, and then we've got Yerson Mosquera. Yeah, that's three. We're still going to be one short, at least one short. Who we bringing in?
Yeah, like you said, Dave, I think in an ideal world, you have two players for every position. And as Gary plays three at the back, that means having 6 centre halves.
Ideally, he'd like to play 4 at the back, wouldn't he, Gary? That's what he started off with. That's he has playing 3 at the back, but I think next season we'll see Wolves playing, if they get the right personnel in a lot of games. I think we could see the Wolves playing for a 4 on the front foot and a 5 on the back foot.
And like you said, I think that's obviously Gary's ideal. And if, as I have him like labelled as, if Kilman is sold, like I said when I was talking about Bueno, I see him as a replacement for Bueno more than Dawson. So I think he fits into Kilman's position and Dawson stays in the middle. So the centre halves I'd be looking at this summer are younger centre halves who are looking to break into the team. And then when Dawson leaves the following year, that's when I'd really go big on a centre back who's, I'd push the boat out for a centre back that year. But, this season I'd stay a bit more reserved and get another centre back in who's capable of providing a bit of squad depth and capable of playing 2, but not that number 1 centre back as a replacement for Dawson. So there's 3 that I'd picked. They're all from Portugal. They each play for one of the big 3 teams over there. So from Benfica, Porto, and Sporting Lisbon. The first one is Thomas Araujo.
And who does he play for at the moment?
He plays for Benfica.
So is this the guy here?
Yeah, that's him, Dave.
There we go. Tell us a bit about him.
Yeah, so I think he's valued at around £15 million, and his contract's due to expire either the end of next season or the season after that. So his contract position isn't great at Benfica. We know they like to, they're really careful with that kind of thing, and they can be really shrewd negotiators when they've got their players tied down. He's got a lot of potential. I think he's definitely one that fits the way we like to play. He's quick as well, which is, I think, sometimes, especially last season, we lacked that pace. Obviously, Yerson coming back, he'll offer that, and Totti as well, already in the squad. But I really like the look of this lad, and I think with other teams also interested in around Europe, it shows that he's a capable centre back.
Fantastic! I love that. That sounds really good. He's got a nice little goatee as well. Next one.
The next one's Eduardo Quaresma, and he plays for Sporting Lisbon. Now, this one is probably out of reach now, as he's just signed a new long-term deal until 2028. He signed that just at the end of May, so just at the end of the season. He has a release clause. Yeah, he's got a release clause of 45 million now. And again, like I said, with Thomas Araujo at Benfica, Sporting Lisbon are really, really shrewd with their negotiations. It's you pay the release clause or you don't sign him. Now, he's a bit more versatile than Thomas Araujo. He can play right back as well, which obviously appeals when you can play in a variety of positions. But at the same time, we have just signed we're almost signing a right back from Brazil, Pedro Lima, who plays right back. So I think this one is probably he's just a bit too far out of reach now. And then the last defender I've shortlisted is a player that we have been linked with, I think, last week, and that was David Carmo, who was at Porto. Here he is in a Braga shirt. I think he was also at Olympiacos last season on loan. It's been reported that Olympiacos have a £20 million option to buy for Carmo, but that expires on the 30th of June, so they haven't got too long left on that. Now Carmo turns 25 at the end of July, so he'd probably come in and expect to be a bit more of a regular centre-back, which doesn't really fit the strategy I had in mind for the centre-back positions. But at the same time, it means that Dawson is fully covered. He's capable of coming in and playing first-team football from the off. So if we did sell Kilman, we have that versatility between, so Santi and Dawson and Totti, you might expect that as the back 3. But also, if either Bueno or Dawson got injured or suspended, he's there straight away to come straight in. I think he'd obviously be available for around 15 or 20 million.
Do you think that's the sort of price range we're looking at? That, like, with that sort of price, and for this young man here as well, that's sort of like that's where we're at. And that you can get good value for that sort of money.
Well, I think you've made the point a few times in the Extra Time podcast, Dave, that often the players who we've signed for around 10, 15, 20 million have been more useful to us than the signings we've made for 30, 35 million. So I wouldn't be against signing a player of their quality at that price.
Fantastic. So that's something for you to think about. And guys, make sure you do stay tuned, because obviously we're going to be getting on to now looking at the sort of fullback, wing back positions, starting with, of course, Nelson Semedo. Now, Nelson Semedo's contract situation adds an extra layer of complexity to the Wolves' defensive plans. He's entering his final year of his contract. Of course, Wolves did do that extension, which they had a year option. And Semedo faces 3 potential outcomes: extending his stay with a pay cut potentially, being sold, or leaving as a free agent next summer. His decision's obviously going to be crucial for the team's defensive outlook. Now, me personally, Lewis, I want Nelson Semedo to stay. I think he was Players' Player of the Year. I know the first year he struggled when he came in. He's been Mr. Consistent. He's kept fairly fit. His defensive awareness is adjusted to the Premier League. He can offer something going forward. His quality, but like you say, he only has a year left of his contract. He's not been signed an extension. What have you been hearing about Nelson Semedo?
Yeah, so like you said, Dave, he was a fantastic player last season. It was definitely his best in a Wolves shirt, and I think the award of Players' Player shows a lot about the respect he's got in the dressing room from his teammates. I think that shows a lot to me, that he's clearly a valued member. I know Gary, it's been reported that Gary really wants him to stay at the club, but there has got to be a decision to be made, because you don't want to risk losing one of your more expensive players that you signed on a free the following season. And also there is the point about his wages being one of the highest at the club, that he's going to have a reduced wage if he does sign a new contract. I think that decision is really important, and they have to make it soon, and it has to be decisive. You can't be unsure about your decision. Sign a new contract and stay, or we have to sell you this summer. Me personally, I would give him that contract, and I understand the restrictions of finances are there, and he will have to sign a reduced contract in terms of wage. But he was so good last season. We're finally seeing the player we paid that money for back in 2020. So, yeah, sign a new contract and stay definitely at least for the next season.
And if you were to sell him, and if he doesn't sign that contract, what sort of fee would Wolves be selling him at?
Well, obviously, we've spoke, Dave, about players who are entering their last year of their deals and how you can get a cheaper price. We have to expect that when selling players too. I think Nelson, obviously 30, he's probably got a few more years of him at the top level. So I expect at least 15 million. I'd hold out for 20, but at the same time, if he's not going to sign a contract and you've decided you're going to sell him, you have to also, you can't be too, well, you can't be too dogged. You've got to say, okay, 15 million, we'll do it, but we'd like 20.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Aitnouri. Now, Ryan Aitnouri, of course, well, he had a really good season last year. His standout in 23-24. He's caught the eyes and been linked to other clubs, but they obviously, Wolves would want to ideally keep the 23-year-old. Wolves do have an option, interestingly, to extend his contract till 2027, so there's no rush to sell. It seems like only a really big offer potentially would sell. You're Matt Hobbs again here, and I'm Gary O'Neill. I want to keep him ideally, but what are you saying? Where are you at?
I think Aitnouri was one of the best players in the squad last season, and I'm also convinced of his importance to Gary's system. On extra time, I've often highlighted the importance of what I've called the Aitnouri role as a left back who pushes on, allows Totti to come to the usual left back position, and Aitnouri goes up on the pitch and goes and helps out going forward. I think that's a really important player to definitely keep. As you said, there is interest in Aitnouri, but his contract situation is fairly strong for the club with that option to extend it for another year. So unless there's a huge offer that comes in, we should have no pressure to sell Aitnouri this season when we have other players that we can sell.
Absolutely. So Ryan Aitnouri, is there, and what sort of offer do you think would tempt Wolves to sell?
Well, I think Aitnouri is a really interesting player because he's so versatile. Obviously, we've seen him play left back and left wing back for the majority of the season, but in some games when we were short on attackers, he actually played in the right wing position. Now, when you're buying a left wing back, the kind of fee you're going to be paying is a lot lower than if you were buying a right winger. But when he's played in the right wing position, he's actually looked really competent. He's capable there. So I think that the buying club, whoever they may be, the club have to sell him as an attacking player rather than a defender, and that will increase the price. I think as I said, he's a very unique player. So I think, again, with the contract situation that he has, it's tied down really for the next 2 years with that option. So I think a fee of 50 million would be, I have no pressure to sell, so I can kind of set the price of Aït-Nouri. 50 million, I'd be interested to consider that. But yeah, I have no real pressure to sell Aït-Nouri if I was Matt Hobbs at all.
Absolutely, only because I say he's on that long-term contract. So, okay, Matt Doherty. Now, obviously, he's come back, Matt. He's one of the few that's had over 300 appearances in total for Wolves. We got him. Obviously, he went to Tottenham. He's come back. Obviously, not quite hit the heights of his first spell, but remains very versatile as a squad member. His value, for me, lies in his ability to cover multiple positions and provide depth. But obviously, he's not going to be a starter. We wouldn't get a lot of money if we sold Matt Doherty anyway. Where are you with that?
Yeah, I think Matt's definitely one I'd keep. And obviously, I spoke about how Tom King doesn't have a role in the club in the medium to long term, or at least I don't see him having one. And I don't see that for Matt either. But I would keep Matt around because I think he's a more important part of the dressing room. As you said, he has that experience. He's one of the few players with that many appearances at the club. And also, when he has played last season, he actually played quite well in most games. I think it was quite a bit of a shame for Matt because when he played, he probably deserved to play the following game, but it was at Nelson, he'd played even better. Had it not been for Nelson's good form, I think Matt would have played a lot more last season. But unfortunately, even though I would keep him this summer, with the arrival of Pedro Lima, which looks like it's going to happen in the 1st of July, his game time looks like it's going to be reduced even more. So as long as he's prepared for that, he's definitely one I'd keep around.
Fantastic. Just on Pedro Lima, what's your thoughts about him? Young 17-year-old Brazilian, obviously not confirmed yet, and until he's holding a Wolves shirt, But what's your thoughts on him? Is he going to be a starter or is he going to be backup for Semedo?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a backup to begin with, especially if we keep Nelson this summer. And I think even if we did sell Nelson, we'd probably sign a first team right back to go in just to give him that time to settle. Obviously, we've seen the pathway for Brazilian players to come to Wolves as João Gomes made the move back in January 2023.
Yeah.
And obviously, I spoke a few days ago on the podcast about, on the fixtures release day, that the fact he's turned down the offers from Chelsea in favour of the Wolves project, which is going to give him more opportunities to play. That tells me a lot about the type of character we're getting, which is, I always like to view players in as many aspects as I can. And one of them is not only their playing ability, it's also, well, how are they as a person? And the fact he turned down a higher salary with, it's a bigger name, Chelsea, than Wolves. They're Champions League winners in the past. I think that shows me that he is committed to playing. And that is the most important thing for young players. They have to want to play in order to develop and become better players. So I'm very happy with that signing that should happen soon.
Okay, and that brings us on to Hugo Bueno. Obviously, he got thrust into the team through injuries, made a great impact, but he's found his progress held back by lack of minutes this season. 21-year-old is liked by a few clubs in Germany and his native Spain. Is a Wolves Academy graduate. Would present pure profit on the accounting books if he just goes. Do you think the club would sell Hugo at the right price?
At the right price, Dave, I think they would sell. But they also have to consider that Hugo Bueno is a very unique player in that he's Spanish, but also represents a homegrown player in the Premier League squad registration rules. So obviously at the start of each season, you need
what that means for people that don't understand that.
Yeah, so each season when you register your playing squad with the Premier League, you have to have a set number. I think it might be about 9 or 10 homegrown players, and that means they have to have trained or played in England before, I think it's the 21st birthday, or
about
maybe
3 years.
Yeah, for 3 years before their 21st birthday. And obviously, as an academy graduate, Hugo Bueno is that. He's a homegrown player, which is
Even though
unusual
he's
for a
Spanish.
Spanish player. Exactly. So that's an incentive to keep him, because it helps with that side of things, especially with, obviously we've signed 2 players so far, one of them being Tomidor, who is a homegrown player. But Rodrigo Gomez isn't, because he hasn't trained in England for that many years before his 21st birthday. So it
But
looks
Pedro
like
Lima, although because he's not 18 till the 1st of July,
exactly.
would qualify as well.
So yeah, again, he'll be a Brazilian player who does have that homegrown status. So it's really interesting that these kind of finer details. But like I said, Dave, if an offer came in that was worthwhile and had favourable clauses involved, maybe a sell-on clause, because he's still only young, 21, is very young for a left back, a left defender. He can still improve a lot. He has a lot of potential in him. I would sell him for that right price with the favourable terms, but he's also one I'd look to keep this summer, I'd say.
Look to keep it. And what's sort of a favourable? We'll put him in the keep, but like, what's a favourable price to sell him for you?
I think for me, it depends on the type of club we're selling to. So if you're going to an English club, I'd expect a bit more, maybe an extra 10-15%, because then they're having our homegrown player. But if he's going to Spain or to Germany, as the rumours are saying that they're the clubs mainly interested in him, that factor doesn't really come into it. So I'd say anywhere from 10 to 12 million for a Spanish or German club, and then for an English club, I'd start the negotiations at 15, and I'd be tempted to sell at about 13.5, 14.
Fantastic. So that brings us on to the next one on the list, and we have got another couple that we'll talk about briefly, but Ki-Jana Hoover, who's been on a solid loan spell at Stoke.
Yeah, so I think obviously Hoover is very young too. I've just said Bueno's young for 21 and Hoover's only 22. But I just don't see his pathway into the squad in the same way I can see a pathway into it for Bueno. Obviously, Semedo is the first choice, and if he stays at the club and signs an extension, he remains that for this season. Pedro Lima's just been signed as he will be signed as a right back. So to me, that there isn't that opportunity, and obviously Matt Doherty's still at the club. So I think a third loan in 3 years, especially to Stoke, that I'd prefer them to buy him this summer. And obviously we paid a smaller fee to him than maybe we should have to Liverpool, because it was part of that Jota deal. But I would like it again. A sell-on clause is something I'd be keen to include in any offer that we sent over to Stoke.
So there's Stoke. And another couple just to talk about, Dexter Lembikisa, still young and under contract till 2026. Do you think he'll be given any opportunities, or do you think it'll be another loan for him?
Yeah, again, I think the loan is probably the best option for Dexter. He's probably too good to play for the academy now. He needs to be playing men's first team football at this stage of his career. But as I said about Hoover, it's not going to happen here. So if he goes out to a Championship League One side and plays again consistently throughout the course of the season, that's the best solution for him.
So yeah, Dexter would be under the loan. And then I've got down here Nigel Lonwidgick and Justin Hubner, both highly rated but not ready for first team action. They're expected, would you say, to go out on loan again with discussions about a new deal?
Yeah, I'd if you're going to loan a player, Dave, I always do like to try and negotiate an extension on their deal, because then you haven't lost anything at all. They've improved, you've kept them on the same contract length, and they've gone away and played, and you probably get a loan fee in for them as well. So I'd loan both of those players, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that concludes part one of our keep, loan, sell, and also potential buy, because obviously each one of these segments that we're looking at, Lewis has done some research on potential incomings that could help complement the squad. To say there's a few of those there, Jose Sarr, Max Kilman, their sell but subject to the right fee. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what we've had to say, what Lewis has had to say in the comment section below. If you really enjoyed this video, please make sure you smash that like. And don't forget, we've got part 1 and part 2 coming up soon as well. So hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification, and the next one up, we'll be looking at Wolves midfield. So from myself and Lewis on this part of the 3-part series, hope you've enjoyed it. Always Wolves.
Always Wolves.